Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I'm about to tell you mine. It still makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. It all started with a freaking pottery class. Seriously. Me, covered in clay, trying to make a vaguely bowl-shaped object. I'd signed up as a way to de-stress from my hectic job as a marketing assistant. That's where I saw him. Liam. Tall, with this intense gaze and hands that looked way too capable for just making pots. We got talking about the disastrous state of our respective attempts at pottery. And he had this really dry sense of humor that I found myself drawn to. He asked me out for coffee after class. It felt normal, refreshingly normal. Our first date was at this cozy cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and way too many succulents. We talked for hours. He was a software engineer, apparently really good at it, and he was into all the same nerdy stuff I was: old video games, obscure sci-fi movies, the whole shebang. He seemed genuine, like he actually listened when I spoke, instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. He even laughed at my terrible jokes. I was smitten, to say the least. Things moved fast, which, looking back, should have been my first red flag. But I was so caught up in the whirlwind of it all. After a few weeks of dates, we were practically inseparable. We spent weekends hiking in the nearby mountains, binge-watching terrible reality TV, and cooking, or attempting to cook, elaborate meals together. He even introduced me to his friends, who seemed just as cool and down-to-earth as he was. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Then came the invitation to his family's cabin. His parents were away on some cruise, and he thought it would be romantic for us to spend a long weekend alone together, surrounded by nature. The cabin was in the middle of nowhere, nestled deep in the woods of northern Wisconsin. No cell service, no Wi-Fi. Just us in the wilderness. It sounded amazing at first. A chance to disconnect and really connect with him. The drive up was beautiful. The leaves were changing, painting the landscape in shades of red and gold. Liam was playing my favorite music, and we were singing along at the top of our lungs. I remember feeling so happy, so carefree, so stupidly trusting. The cabin itself was rustic but charming. It had a huge stone fireplace, cozy bedrooms, and a porch overlooking a crystal-clear lake. We spent the afternoon exploring the surrounding trails, hand in hand, breathing in the crisp autumn air. That night, we built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and told each other stories until the early hours. That's when things started getting weird. I woke up in the middle of the night to find Liam standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. He wasn't just looking. He was fixated. His eyes were wide, and his face was pale. When I asked him what was wrong, he jumped, like he hadn't even realized I was there. He mumbled something about hearing a noise, and went back to bed. The next day, he was different. He was quieter, more withdrawn. He kept disappearing for hours, claiming he was working on something in the shed behind the cabin. He wouldn't tell me what he was working on, and he got defensive whenever I asked. I tried to shake it off, to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. But something felt off, deeply off. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, my mind racing with anxieties. I got up to get a glass of water, and as I walked past Liam's bedroom, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I hesitated for a moment, then peeked inside. He wasn't in bed. I glanced around the room, and that's when I saw it. A notebook lying open on his desk. It was filled with writing, not just any writing, but bizarre symbols and diagrams, and words I didn't understand. Some of the pages were filled with repeated phrases, like "the veil is thin," and "they are watching." It looked like some kind of deranged occult ritual. My heart hammered in my chest. I backed away from the door, my blood running cold. What the hell was going on? I went back to my room and locked the door, trying to calm myself down. Maybe it was just some weird hobby. A fascination with the occult. Maybe I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. I decided to leave. First thing in the morning, I was getting out of that cabin. I barely slept that night. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle in the woods outside, sent jolts of fear through me. I kept imagining Liam standing outside my door, his eyes filled with that same unsettling intensity one had seen the night before. As soon as the sun began to rise, I packed my bag and crept out of my room. The cabin was eerily silent. Liam was nowhere to be seen. I grabbed my keys and headed for the front door, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. That's when I heard it, a low, guttural chanting coming from the shed. My stomach clenched. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know what he was doing. I crept around to the back of the cabin and slowly approached the shed. The chanting grew louder, more frantic. I peeked through a crack in the door. What I saw inside will haunt me forever. Liam was standing in the center of the shed, surrounded by candles arranged in a circle. He was wearing a long, dark robe and chanting in a language I didn't recognize. In front of him was a makeshift altar, and on the altar sat a photograph. It was a photograph of me. My blood turned to ice. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed with fear. I watched in horror as Liam raised a knife above the photograph and began to chant even louder. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I turned and ran, as fast as I could, back towards the car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. Finally, the engine roared to life, and I slammed the car into reverse, tearing out of the driveway. I didn't stop driving until I reached the nearest town. I went straight to the police station and told them everything. They were skeptical at first, but they agreed to investigate. When they went back to the cabin, Liam was gone. The shed was empty, except for the candles and the altar. The photograph of me was still there, but it had been defaced with a series of strange symbols. They never found him. I moved back to the city, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I still have nightmares about that cabin, about Liam's eyes, about the chanting in the shed. I haven't been on a date since. And honestly, I don't know if I ever will be. Sometimes, I wonder if he's still out there, watching me, waiting for the right moment to. I don't even want to think about it. I guess the moral of the story is, be careful who you swipe right on. You never really know what someone is hiding. And sometimes, the most charming people are the ones you should be the most afraid of. It was a nightmare. One that I wish I could forget. I hope you learned something from this. I really do. I was super into growing my own tomatoes that summer. I lived in this tiny apartment downtown, but I'd managed to cram a surprising amount of greenery onto my balcony. The app was basically a social network for plant parents, where you could share tips, trade seedlings, and, apparently, find love. I wasn't really looking, but his profile picture was of him holding a giant sunflower, and, I don't know, I was feeling optimistic. His name was Daniel. He was tall, kind of lanky, with these intense blue eyes and this shy smile that made you want to protect him. He said he worked as a software developer from home, which seemed perfect for my chaotic artist lifestyle. We messaged for a couple weeks, swapping pictures of our sad-looking basil and arguing about the best way to get rid of aphids. He was funny, smart, and surprisingly insightful. I started to get this fluttery feeling whenever I saw his name pop up on my phone. Our first date was at this little bookstore cafe near my place. He brought me a succulent in a tiny ceramic pot, and I thought, okay, this guy might actually be the real deal. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood, growing up in this small town upstate, and how he'd always felt like an outsider. I told him about my dreams of becoming a full-time artist, and how terrified I was of failing. It was one of those dates where time just seemed to disappear. Things moved fast after that. We started spending almost every night together. He'd come over after work, and we'd cook dinner, watch movies, and just talk. He was so attentive, so caring. He always remembered the little things, like how I took my coffee or what kind of flowers I liked. It was like he was trying to be the perfect boyfriend, and honestly, it was working. After a month, he suggested we take a weekend trip. He said he wanted to show me his hometown. I was hesitant at first. Meeting the parents that early on? That seemed like a big step. But he was so insistent, and I was so caught up in the whirlwind of our relationship, that I eventually agreed. The town was even smaller and more isolated than I'd imagined. Think one main street, a gas station, and a whole lot of trees. His house was on the outskirts of town, a big, old Victorian with peeling paint and a slightly creepy vibe. It looked like something out of a horror movie. His parents were strange. His mom was overly sweet, constantly fussing over us and offering us food we didn't want. His dad was quiet and reserved, with this unsettling way of staring that made me deeply uncomfortable. They kept asking me weirdly specific questions about my family, my job, and my future plans. It felt less like getting to know me and more like an interrogation. That night, Daniel insisted we sleep in separate rooms. He said his parents were old-fashioned and wouldn't approve. I thought it was weird, but I didn't want to make a fuss. The guest room was freezing and smelled faintly of mothballs. I tossed and turned for hours, unable to shake this growing sense of unease. The next day, things got even weirder. Daniel took me on a tour of the town, pointing out landmarks like the old church and the abandoned mill. But he seemed different, distant. He kept looking over his shoulder, like he was afraid someone was watching us. We ended up at this secluded lake, surrounded by towering pines. It was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about the silence. As we sat on the dock, Daniel started talking about his family history. He said they'd lived in this town for generations, and that they were different. He wouldn't elaborate, but he kept using words like tradition and legacy. That's when I noticed a symbol. It was carved into the wooden planks of the dock, a strange, intricate design that I couldn't quite make out. It looked ancient, almost ritualistic. Suddenly, Daniel stood up. He started pacing back and forth, his voice getting louder and more agitated. He told me he'd brought me here for a reason. He started talking about how he needed someone to help him carry on his family's burden. I was completely lost. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling. He turned to me, his eyes wide and frantic. "They choose someone every generation," he said. "Someone to maintain the balance." Maintain what balance? My mind raced. Then he grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "You're perfect," he whispered. "You're strong, you're creative, you're worthy." Worthy of what? Being sacrificed to some ancient lake monster? I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. He started chanting something under his breath, a low, guttural sound that sent chills down my spine. The air around us felt thick, heavy. The lake seemed to darken, the surface rippling even though there was no wind. I finally managed to wrench my hand free. I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't try to stop me. He just stood there, staring at me with those intense blue eyes, a look of desperate pleading on his face. I ran. I ran all the way back to the house, grabbed my bag, and called a cab. I didn't say goodbye to his parents. I didn't leave a note. I just got the hell out of there. I didn't hear from Daniel for weeks. I blocked his number, his social media, everything. I tried to convince myself that I'd imagined the whole thing, that it was just a bad dream. Then, one night, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of the symbol, carved into the doorframe of my apartment. I moved out the next day. I never found out what Daniel and his family were really up to. I don't want to know. All I know is that some things are better left buried, and some people are better left alone, and that sometimes a guy who brings you a succulent is actually assigned to run in the opposite direction. I still have nightmares about that lake, about the chanting, about the look on Daniel's face. I haven't used dating apps since, and I definitely don't grow sunflowers. I stick to cacti now. They're less inviting. It may have ruined gardening apps for me. I was scrolling through, bored out of my mind on a Tuesday night, when I saw him. Liam. He was different. Not like, wears Hawaiian shirts to the office different, but like, there was something about his eyes in the photos. They were super intense, and held this weird calm. He had this whole artist vibe going on. All messy hair and paint-splattered jeans. His profile said he was into photography and obscure indie films. Perfect, I thought. I'm a sucker for the artsy type. We matched, and started chatting. He was witty, smart, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. He wasn't throwing out cheesy pickup lines or asking for my number right away. It was actually a really nice conversation. After a few days, he suggested we meet up. He said he knew this super cool, hidden away cafe that had the best coffee in the city. The cafe was in this part of town I'd never really been to before. It was all old warehouses and cobblestone streets, kind of run down but with a certain charm. Liam was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table in the corner, bathed in the dim, warm light of a vintage lamp. He looked even more striking in person. The date started out great. We talked about everything, our families, our dreams, our favorite movies. He listened intently, making eye contact that felt a little too intense, but I brushed it off as him just being a good listener. He asked a lot of questions about my childhood, about my fears, about what made me tick. I felt like he was trying to peel back all my layers and see what was underneath. It was kind of unnerving, but also kind of exciting. As the night went on, the conversation took a weird turn. He started talking about this project he was working on, a photography series about the human soul. He said he wanted to capture the essence of people, their true selves, in a single image. He talked about how he wanted to explore the darkness and the light, the beauty and the ugliness that existed within us all. It was all a bit much for a first date, but I figured he was just passionate about his art. Then he started asking me about my dreams again, only this time he was getting really specific. He wanted to know about my recurring nightmares, about the things that haunted me in my sleep. I told him about this dream I had where I was trapped in a maze, and there was this figure chasing me, but I could never see its face. He got this strange look in his eyes, almost like he recognized the maze. After the coffee shop, he insisted on walking me home. It was late, and the streets were deserted. As we walked, he started talking about this theory he had about parallel universes. He said that every decision we make creates a new reality, a new version of ourselves. He said that maybe, in another universe, we were already together, living a completely different life. It was getting weirder and weirder. When we got to my apartment building, he didn't try to kiss me or anything. He just stood there, staring at me with those intense eyes. He said, "I feel like I've known you my whole life." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I went inside, feeling totally creeped out. I tried to shake it off, telling myself that he was just an eccentric artist, but something about the whole night felt deeply unsettling. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversations in my head, trying to figure out what had made me feel so uncomfortable. The next day, I did a little digging online. I searched for Liam's name, trying to find his photography website or any trace of his art. But there was nothing. No social media, no online portfolio, nothing. It was like he didn't exist. That's when I started to freak out. I decided to drive back to the cafe where we had met, hoping to talk to the owner or someone who might know him. But when I got there, the cafe was gone. The building was empty, boarded up, and abandoned. There was no sign that a cafe had ever been there. I felt like I was losing my mind. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I going crazy? I went back to my apartment and started researching local artists, hoping to find someone who knew Liam. I spent hours scrolling through websites and online forums, but I couldn't find anything. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Then, I stumbled upon an old newspaper article about a string of disappearances in the city. Young women, all around my age, had gone missing over the past few years. The article mentioned that the police had no leads, no suspects, no nothing. As I read the article, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The last woman who had disappeared had been seen leaving a coffee shop in the same neighborhood where I had met Liam, the coffee shop that no longer existed. I called the police, told them everything, but they seemed skeptical. They said they would look into it, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They probably thought I was just a crazy girl who had been stood up on a date. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit around and wait for him to come back. I started carrying pepper spray, avoiding dark alleys, and telling my friends where I was going at all times. I felt like I was being watched, like he was always just one step behind me. A week later, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I hesitated before opening it, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside, there was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, asleep in my bed. I don't know how he got into my apartment. I don't know how he took that picture without me waking up. All I know is that I never saw him again. I moved to a different city, changed my phone number, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. But every now and then, I still see him in my dreams. He's always standing in the shadows, just out of reach. And I know, deep down, that he's still out there, somewhere. I was on an hiking app of all things. I know, right? Super original. I was bored, swiping through profiles, looking for someone who wasn't holding a dead fish or flexing way too hard in a gym mirror. Then I saw him. Jake, his profile said, accompanied by a picture of him looking genuinely happy on top of some mountain peak. He seemed normal, outdoorsy, but not like aggressively so. We matched, chatted for a bit about our favorite trails, and decided to meet up for a hike at this place called Blackwood Forest. I'd never been, but he swore it was beautiful. Untouched, he said. Big mistake, huge. Blackwood Forest wasn't exactly untouched. More like abandoned. The parking lot was mostly empty, overgrown with weeds, and the trailhead sign was practically falling apart. But Jake was already there, grinning like an idiot, and I didn't want to be rude and bail immediately. I figured, hey, maybe the trail itself would be better. It wasn't. The path was narrow, winding through these incredibly tall, dark trees that blocked out most of the sunlight. It felt way more isolated than any hike I'd been on before. Jake kept talking, pointing out different types of plants and birds, but I couldn't shake this feeling that we were being watched. I kept glancing around, half expecting a bear to jump out, but it was just the silence that was freaking me out. Like the kind of silence where you can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. After about an hour, we reached this clearing. There was this old stone well in the middle, covered in moss and vines. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Jake, being Jake, went right up to it and started peering inside. Creepy, right? He said, chuckling. I didn't think it was funny at all. I just wanted to turn around and go home. That's when things started to get weird. We were about to head back when I heard something. A faint scratching sound coming from the woods. I stopped dead in my tracks. Did you hear that? I asked Jake. He listened for a second, then shrugged. Probably just an animal. But it didn't sound like an animal. It sounded purposeful, like something was dragging itself through the underbrush. We started walking again, but the scratching kept getting closer. I picked up my pace, trying to ignore it, but it was no use. My heart was pounding in my chest. Then I saw it. A flash of movement, just out of the corner of my eye. Something dark and hunched over, moving behind the trees. I gasped and grabbed Jake's arm. There's something out there, I whispered, my voice trembling. He looked at me like I was crazy. What are you talking about? It's just your imagination. But I knew what I saw. And whatever it was following us. We started running, back the way we came. The scratching grew louder, faster. I could feel my breath catching in my throat, my legs burning. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see, I don't even know what. Some kind of monster, straight out of a nightmare. Jake, bless his oblivious heart, was still trying to reassure me that it was just an animal. Relax, he kept saying. It's probably just a deer. But I knew it wasn't a deer. Deer don't scratch. Deer don't stalk. We finally made it back to the parking lot, gasping for air. I scrambled into my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. Jake was still standing there, looking confused. What was that all about? He asked, as I rolled down the window. I don't know, I said, my voice still shaky. But I'm not sticking around to find out. I drove away as fast as I could, leaving Jake standing there in the empty parking lot. I didn't care if I seemed rude. I just wanted to get as far away from that forest as possible. The next day, I tried to forget about the whole thing. I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was being paranoid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something was still out there, in those woods. A week later, I got a text from Jake. Hey, it said, sorry about ditching you the other day. My phone died and I had to walk all the way back. Anyway, want to give it another shot? There's this other trail I know. I deleted his number immediately. But the worst part? A few weeks after that, I saw a news report about Blackwood Forest. Apparently, some hikers had gone missing. They never found them, and the police were investigating reports of strange noises and unexplained sightings in the area. To this day, I still get chills when I think about Blackwood Forest. And I definitely don't go hiking alone anymore. Dating apps? Yeah, I'm good on those for a while. Sometimes I think I saw someone else after Jake too. I was always wondering if I could have saved him. It's always been on my mind. I still think about Blackwood Forest, I still think about Jake, and those missing hikers. I have never hiked again. It all started with this dude, Mark. He seemed totally normal online. His profile was, like, aggressively average. Hiking pictures. A blurry shot of him at a concert, the standard, looking for someone to share adventures with bio. Nothing screamed serial killer, which, honestly, is my bare minimum requirement these days. We matched, chatted for a few days, and he seemed nice. A little quiet, maybe, but nice. He suggested meeting up for coffee at this place downtown. It was a new spot, all exposed brick and fancy lighting. The kind of place where you feel obligated to order something complicated and overpriced. The coffee date went okay. He was a bit more reserved in person, but we talked about travel, movies, and our jobs. He was an engineer, which I found kind of attractive in a nerdy way. He laughed at my jokes. I laughed at his, even the ones that weren't that funny. And by the end of it, I figured, hey, why not go on a second date? That's where things started to get weird. He suggested a picnic. Which, fine, picnics are cute. But he wanted to have it at this park way outside the city. Like, bordering on the middle of nowhere, kind of outside the city. He said it was a hidden gem with amazing views. I almost bailed right there. My inner alarm bells were starting to ring, but I'm an idiot. So I ignored them. I figured, worst case scenario, I could pepper spray him and run. The drive to the park was unsettling. The road got narrower and narrower. The trees got thicker and thicker. And my phone service went from full bars to SOS only in about 5 minutes. When we finally arrived, the park was less a park and more a clearing in the woods with a rickety picnic table. The view was okay. You could see some rolling hills in the distance, but mostly you could see trees. Lots and lots of trees. Mark had brought a basket filled with sandwiches, fruit, and a bottle of wine. We ate in awkward silence for a while. He kept staring at me. Not in a flirty way, but in a calculating, almost clinical way. It made my skin crawl. I tried to make conversation, asking him about his work, his family, anything to break the tension. But he just gave short, clipped answers. Then he started talking about his house. He mentioned that he lived alone, way out in the country, on a huge piece of land that had been in his family for generations. He described the house as rustic and secluded. He kept using words like private and isolated. My alarm bells were now clanging so loudly I could barely hear myself think. As the sun started to set, the woods got darker and the temperature dropped. I started feeling really uneasy. I told Mark I had to go, that I had an early morning the next day. He didn't argue. He just packed up the picnic basket and led me back to the car. The drive back was even more terrifying than the drive there. The road was pitch black, the trees seemed to be closing in, and Mark was driving way too fast. I kept glancing over at him, trying to read his expression, but his face was unreadable. He finally pulled up to my apartment building. I practically leaped out of the car, mumbled a quick thanks, and practically ran inside. I watched from my window as he drove away, his headlights disappearing into the night. I thought that was the end of it. I blocked his number, deleted his profile from the dating app, and tried to forget the whole thing. But a few days later, I started getting weird phone calls. My phone would ring, but when I answered, there would be nothing but silence. I checked the caller ID, but the number was always blocked. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but the calls kept coming, several times a day. Then I started noticing things. Small things, like my trash cans being moved to a different spot, or my doormat being slightly askew. I chalked it up to paranoia, but the feeling that I was being watched wouldn't go away. One night, I woke up to a scratching sound outside my window. I peered through the blinds, but I couldn't see anything. I dismissed it as a branch scraping against the glass, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there. The next morning, I found a small, hand-carved wooden bird on my doorstep. It was crudely made, but unsettlingly realistic. I had never seen anything like it before. I threw it away immediately, but the image of that bird stayed with me. Things escalated quickly after that. I started getting text messages from an unknown number. They weren't threatening, exactly, but they were creepy. Things like, "I see you," or "You look beautiful in blue." I changed my number, but the messages kept coming. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. They suggested I get a security system and a restraining order, but I didn't even know who to get a restraining order against. I was living in a constant state of fear. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was watching me, waiting for me to make a mistake. One night, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. My heart leaped into my throat. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. I flicked on the light switch, and what I saw made me scream. Every surface in my apartment was covered in those wooden birds. They were hanging from the ceiling, perched on the shelves, and scattered across the floor. They were everywhere. And then I saw him. Mark was sitting in my armchair, calmly whittling another bird. He looked up at me and smiled. "I made you a gift," he said, holding up the bird. I don't remember much after that. I remember screaming, running, and fumbling with my keys as I tried to get out of the apartment. I remember him chasing after me, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. I managed to escape, running down the stairs and out into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached the police station. They finally took me seriously. They went to my apartment and arrested Mark. They found a whole workshop in his basement, filled with hundreds of those wooden birds. He's in jail now, awaiting trial. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and started therapy. I still have nightmares about those birds, about his eyes, about the feeling of being watched. I haven't been on a dating app since. I don't think I ever will again. Some hidden gems are better left undiscovered. That's for sure. Okay, so, you know how everyone has that one dating story that makes you want to crawl into a hole and never swipe right again? This is mine. Buckle up because it's a wild ride. It all started with a picture. A totally normal picture, mind you. Just some dude, let's call him Mark, smiling in front of a bookstore. He looked nice. Like genuinely kind nice. Not the "I'm hiding something" nice. I was cautiously optimistic, you know. I'd been on a string of dates that were basically dumpster fires, so my expectations were subterranean. Anyway, we matched, we chatted, and he seemed cool. We had similar interests. He made me laugh, and he wasn't aggressively thirsty, which, honestly, is a win these days. We decided to meet up. He suggested this little cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and way too many succulents. I thought, okay, hipster vibes, but I can handle it. I even put on my "I'm trying, but not trying too hard" outfit, ripped jeans, a band tee, and my trusty leather jacket. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, nursing a coffee. And I gotta admit, he looked even better in person. He stood up when he saw me, gave me a genuine smile, and the conversation just flowed. We talked about everything, our families, our jobs, our favorite movies, even our weirdest childhood memories. Hours flew by. I actually forgot I was on a date, which is rare for me. Usually, I'm mentally planning my escape route like 5 minutes in. He walked me back to my car, and we hugged goodbye. A normal, friendly hug. No weird lingering. No awkward hand-holding. Just as simple. I had a great time. And I did. I really did. I actually felt hopeful. The next few weeks were a blur of dates. We went to concerts, museums, hiking, even that escape room I'd been dying to try. Each time, I liked him more. He was thoughtful, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He remembered little things I'd said. He always made sure I was comfortable, and he treated me like an actual person, not just some girl he was trying to impress. It felt easy. Too easy, maybe. And that's where things started to get a little off. It started subtly. He'd start showing up at places I mentioned I was going to. "Oh, hey, fancy seeing you here," he'd say, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The first couple of times, I brushed it off as coincidence. Maybe he just liked the same coffee shop as me. Or maybe he just happened to be at the same bookstore. But then it started happening more and more. I'd mention I was going to the gym, and he'd be there the next day. I'd talk about wanting to try a new restaurant, and he'd already made a reservation. It was flattering at first, I guess, but then it started to feel creepy, like he was following me. I tried to play it cool, you know? I didn't want to seem like I was overreacting. But then he started knowing things he shouldn't have known, like really specific things. Things I hadn't told him. Things I'd only mentioned in passing to my friends. One night, we were at his apartment watching a movie. I got up to grab a drink, and I noticed a picture on his bookshelf. It was a picture of me. Not a picture he'd taken, but a picture someone had taken of me, without me knowing. I was walking down the street, talking on the phone. It was a candid shot, and it was unsettling. I confronted him about it. I asked him where he got the picture, and he just laughed it off. He said it was a joke, that a friend had sent it to him because they thought I was cute. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a violation. From that point on, I was on edge. I started paying closer attention to his behavior, and the more I looked, the more I saw. He knew my schedule better than I did. He knew who my friends were, what they did, where they lived. He even knew about that embarrassing incident from high school that I'd sworn I'd never tell anyone. I tried to break up with him, but he wouldn't let me. He'd show up at my work, at my apartment, begging me to give him another chance. He'd shower me with gifts, with apologies, with promises that he'd change. But I knew he wouldn't. I knew he was obsessed. One night, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I cautiously pushed it open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark, but I could hear someone breathing. I flipped on the light, and there he was, sitting on my couch, waiting for me. He smiled when he saw me, a wide, unsettling smile. He had a bouquet of flowers in his hand, my favorite flowers. He started talking, telling me how much he loved me, how he couldn't live without me. He said we were meant to be together, that he knew everything about me, that he understood me better than anyone else ever could. I was terrified. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't find my voice. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He stood up, walked towards me, and offered me the flowers. I didn't take them. "I know you're scared," he said, his voice soft and soothing. "But you don't have to be. I'm here to protect you. I'm here to take care of you. I'm here to love you." I finally found my voice. "Get out," I said, my voice trembling. "Get out of my apartment." He didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me. His eyes were empty. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "We belong together." I grabbed my phone and called the police. He didn't try to stop me. He just watched me, his smile never faltering. The police came, arrested him, and took him away. I pressed charges, and he eventually got a restraining order. I moved to a new apartment, changed my phone number, and tried to forget about him. But I can't. Every time I see a bouquet of my favorite flowers, every time I walk down the street alone, every time I think about dating again, I remember him. And I'm terrified. It's been years, and I still look over my shoulder. I still check my locks multiple times a night. I still have nightmares. So, yeah, that's my dating horror story. It's not a ghost story. It's not a monster story. It's just a story about a guy who was a little too nice, a little too interested, and a whole lot crazy. And it's a story that still haunts me to this day. I'm a lot more careful now. I don't trust easily, and I'm quick to cut off anyone who gives me the slightest red flag. Some people might say I'm being overly cautious. I never believed how everyone has that one dating story they just never talk about. The one that makes you cringe so hard you practically turn inside out. Yeah, well, buckle up, because this is mine. It's not like a murder mystery or anything, but it's messed up enough that I still have trouble sleeping sometimes. It starts with an app, as most terrible stories do. But trust me, it gets way weirder. It was during that weird post-college, pre-real adulting phase. I was living in this tiny apartment in a kinda run-down part of town, working a dead-end job, and spending way too much time scrolling through dating apps. That's when I saw him. Liam. His profile was different. No shirtless gym pics, no group shots with his bros. Just a couple of pictures of him hiking in the mountains, and one of him reading in what looked like an old library. He had this intense, almost brooding look about him, which, I'll admit, I found ridiculously attractive at the time. His bio was short and cryptic, looking for someone who understands the quiet spaces between words. Ugh, I know, super pretentious, but I was so bored with the usual gym, beers, good vibes crowd that I swiped right. We matched instantly. Our initial messages were surprisingly engaging. He wasn't into small talk. He asked about my favorite books, my thoughts on existentialism, and whether I believed in ghosts. It was the kind of stuff I usually only talked about with my super nerdy friends. And here was this objectively hot guy actually interested. We texted for a few days, and then he asked me out. He suggested this place called the Obsidian Tea House, which I'd never heard of. It was supposedly this hidden gem in the older part of the city, known for its exotic teas and, according to Liam, its unique atmosphere. I looked it up online, but there was barely any information about it, just a few blurry photos and some vague reviews about it being an experience. Intrigued and, let's be honest, completely smitten, I said yes. The night of the date, I got all dressed up, feeling a little nervous, but mostly excited. Liam picked me up in this old, beat-up Volvo. It smelled like old books and something vaguely herbal, which, again, I found weirdly appealing. As we drove, he told me more about the tea house, how it was run by this old woman who had traveled the world collecting rare teas and artifacts. He made it sound like stepping into another world. We arrived at the tea house, and it was even stranger than I imagined. It was tucked away on a dark, narrow street, with a single, flickering lantern hanging above the door. The building itself looked ancient, with crumbling stone walls and small, barred windows. It felt more like a forgotten temple than a place where you'd sip tea. Inside, the air was thick with incense and the murmur of hushed voices. The lighting was dim, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. The furniture was a mishmash of antique chairs, low tables, and velvet cushions. In the center of the room, a woman with long, silver hair sat behind a counter, her eyes glittering in the candlelight. She looked exactly like a fortune teller from some old movie. Liam led me to a secluded corner of the room, where we sat on two ornate cushions facing a small, intricately carved table. He ordered us some kind of rare, smoky tea that I couldn't even pronounce. As we waited, I took in the surroundings. The walls were covered in strange symbols and tapestries, depicting scenes I couldn't quite decipher. There were glass cases filled with bizarre objects, shrunken heads, ancient coins, and what looked like mummified animal paws. It was all incredibly unsettling, but I tried to play it cool. The tea arrived, and it tasted earthy, almost like dirt. As we sipped, Liam started telling me about his travels. He claimed he'd spent years wandering the world, studying ancient religions and esoteric philosophies. He talked about astral projection, psychic abilities, and the hidden power of crystals. At first, I was fascinated, but as he went on, his stories became increasingly outlandish. He started talking about secret societies, government conspiracies, and the impending apocalypse. I started feeling really uncomfortable. It wasn't just his crazy stories. It was the way he was looking at me, like he was trying to see inside my soul. He kept asking me probing questions about my beliefs, my fears, my deepest desires. I felt like I was being interrogated, not on a date. At one point, he reached across the table and took my hand. His touch was cold and clammy, and his grip was surprisingly strong. He looked into my eyes and said, "I think you have a great destiny. You just need to be awakened." It was at that moment that I realized this guy wasn't just eccentric. He was completely unhinged. I tried to pull my hand away, but he wouldn't let go. He started talking about how we were meant to be together, how we were destined to unlock the secrets of the universe. I was terrified. I knew I had to get out of there. I managed to wrench my hand free and stammered something about having to go to the bathroom. He didn't seem to notice my discomfort. He just smiled and said, "Take your time. Our journey is just beginning." I practically ran to the bathroom, which was even creepier than the main room. It was small and dimly lit, with a cracked mirror and a rusty sink. I splashed some water on my face, trying to calm myself down. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed something strange. My eyes looked different. They seemed wider, darker, almost vacant. I blinked, and the reflection went back to normal. I told myself it was just the dim lighting and my own anxiety playing tricks on me. When I came out of the bathroom, Liam was gone. The old woman behind the counter beckoned me over. She gave me this knowing look and said, "He's waiting for you in the garden." The garden? I hadn't seen a garden. She pointed towards a dark doorway at the back of the room. Hesitantly, I walked towards it. As I stepped through the doorway, I was met with a blast of cold air. I found myself in a small, enclosed courtyard, surrounded by high stone walls. In the center of the courtyard, there was a gnarled, ancient tree, its branches reaching up towards the sky like skeletal arms. And there he was, Liam, standing beneath the tree, bathed in the pale moonlight. He was smiling, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a predatory smile. He held out his hand and said, "Come, it's time for your initiation." That's when I ran. I ran as fast as I could, back through the tea house, out the front door, and into the street. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. I locked the door, closed the blinds, and spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, too afraid to sleep. The next day, I tried to find the obsidian tea house again, but it was gone. The building was just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. I checked online, but there was no record of it ever existing. It was like it had vanished into thin air. I never saw Liam again either. I blocked his number, deleted his profile, and tried to forget the whole thing ever happened. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about that tea house, that garden, and that terrifying smile. And I wonder if I really did escape, or if a part of me is still trapped there, waiting for my initiation. I stopped using dating apps after that. I just stick to meeting people through friends now. It's way less likely to end up with you running for your life from a potential cult leader. Okay, so listen. I'm not usually one to spill my guts online, but I gotta get this off my chest. It's been eating away at me for months, and honestly, talking about it to my friends just makes them look at me with this weird mix of pity and terror. Maybe a bunch of strangers on the internet can offer some kind of perspective? Anyway, here goes nothing. It all started with a dating app, the usual. I was bored, a little lonely, and figured why not? I swiped through a bunch of profiles, most of them forgettable, until I landed on his. Liam. He was different. Not in a wearing a fedora and quoting Nietzsche kind of different, but in a way that made my stomach flip. He had this dark, intense gaze in his photos, like he knew something everyone else didn't. His profile was simple, just a few lines about hiking, old movies, and a love for quiet evenings. Seemed harmless enough, right? We matched, and the messages started flying. He was witty, thoughtful, and genuinely seemed interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, our families, our dreams, our favorite books. He even remembered little details I'd mentioned in passing, which, let's be real, is a lost art these days. After a week of nonstop chatting, he asked me out. I was hesitant at first. Something about him still felt off, like a slightly sour note in an otherwise perfect melody. But I pushed it aside. I hadn't felt this spark with someone in ages, and I didn't want to let it go. Our first date was at this little vintage bookstore downtown that I'd always wanted to check out. Liam was already there when I arrived, browsing the shelves with a leather-bound book in his hand. He looked even better in person, tall and lean with messy dark hair and those piercing eyes that could see right through you. The date went amazing. We talked for hours, lost in a world of dusty books and whispered secrets. We discovered we had a shared love for classic horror movies, and he even quoted lines from The Shining perfectly. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly after that. He'd take me on these quirky, offbeat dates that were nothing like the boring dinner and a movie routine. We went to antique shops filled with creepy dolls, explored abandoned buildings on the outskirts of town, and even visited a supposedly haunted cemetery at midnight. Liam seemed to thrive in these strange, unsettling environments. He'd tell me stories about local legends and urban myths, his voice low and hypnotic in the darkness. I loved it. It was exciting, different, and it made me feel alive. But as the weeks went by, things started to get weird. Liam became more possessive, constantly wanting to know where I was and who I was with. He'd call me multiple times a day, and if I didn't answer right away, he'd get this strange, almost frantic tone in his voice. He also started isolating me from my friends and family. He'd make subtle digs about them, implying they didn't understand me or that they were holding me back. Slowly, I found myself spending less and less time with the people I cared about, and more time with Liam. His obsession with the macabre also intensified. He started bringing me gifts, strange, unsettling objects like antique mourning jewelry and taxidermied animals. He even gave me a human skull he claimed to have found at an estate sale. I tried to brush it off as just his unique sense of humor, but deep down, I was starting to get seriously creeped out. One night, he took me to his family's cabin in the woods. It was an old, dilapidated place, surrounded by towering pines and an eerie silence that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. He said it had been in his family for generations and that it was his sanctuary. As soon as we walked inside, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. The cabin was filled with strange artifacts, dusty books bound in leather, antique weapons, and portraits of stern-looking people who seemed to be watching me. That night, Liam started acting different. He became distant and withdrawn, his eyes glazed over with a strange intensity. He started talking about things I didn't understand, ancient rituals, dark magic, and the importance of preserving his family's legacy. He kept referring to me as the chosen one, and saying that I was destined to play a vital role in some kind of grand plan. I was terrified. I tried to tell him I wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let me. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and told me that I couldn't leave, that I was part of something bigger now. I managed to break free from his grasp and ran out of the cabin into the pitch-black woods. I could hear him calling after me, his voice echoing through the trees, but I didn't stop running. I ran until I reached the main road, where I flagged down a passing car. The driver took me to the nearest police station, where I told them everything. The police investigated Liam and his family's cabin. What they found was disturbing. Turns out, Liam's family had a long history of involvement in occult practices, and that they had been linked to several disappearances in the area over the years. The police found a hidden room in the cabin filled with ritualistic objects and disturbing writings. Liam was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, including kidnapping and suspected involvement in the missing persons cases. I haven't seen or heard from Liam since that night. I'm still trying to process everything that happened, to make sense of the nightmare I lived through. I'm in therapy now, trying to heal from the trauma. I deleted all my dating apps, and honestly, I don't think I'll be going on a date anytime soon. The worst part is, sometimes, late at night, I still dream about him. I dream about his dark eyes, his captivating stories, and the unsettling feeling that something was always just a little bit off. And I wonder, what if I hadn't run? What if I had stayed? What kind of legacy was he talking about? I try not to think about it too much. I just want to move on, to forget. But some things are just burned into your memory, like a brand. I guess the lesson is, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And maybe, just maybe, stay away from guys who give you human skulls as gifts. Just a thought. You know how everyone has that one dating story they swear is, like, straight out of a horror movie? Well, buckle up, because this is mine. And trust me, I still get the creeps just thinking about it. It all started with a dating app, the usual. Swiping left, swiping right, the whole shebang. Then I saw him. Liam. Dark hair, brooding eyes. A smile that looked both charming and slightly off. But hey, I was feeling adventurous, or maybe just plain bored. So I swiped right, and he swiped right back. We chatted for a bit, the standard getting-to-know-you stuff. He was a writer, loved old movies, and apparently lived out in the countryside. Seemed like my type, artsy and a little bit mysterious. After a week of texting, he suggested we meet up. He lived a bit of a drive, but he insisted on picking me up. Red flag number 1, maybe? But I ignored it. I figured, hey, at least I wouldn't have to worry about parking. The day of the date, I was actually kind of excited. I put on my favorite jeans, a cute top, and did my makeup just right. Liam arrived right on time, driving an old, beat-up Jeep. It was definitely rustic. He got out, and he was even more handsome in person. That smile still had that unsettling edge, but I chalked it up to nerves. The drive was long. really long. We left the city limits and wound through these narrow, dark roads, lined with trees that seemed to claw at the sky. The sun was starting to set, and the whole vibe was getting increasingly spooky. I tried to make conversation, but Liam was strangely quiet, just offering short, clipped responses. Finally, we arrived at his place. It wasn't a house, more like a cabin. A really old, run-down cabin, deep in the woods. There was no other sign of civilization, no other houses, no streetlights, just trees and darkness. He led me inside, and the air was thick with the smell of dust and something else, something I couldn't quite place. The cabin was dimly lit by a couple of old lamps. The furniture was antique, borderline creepy, and the walls were covered in old books and strange artifacts. Like, seriously strange. There was a collection of antique dolls with glassy eyes that seemed to follow me around the room, and a bunch of taxidermied animals, staring blankly into space. It felt like stepping into a haunted museum. He offered me a glass of wine, and I accepted, mostly because I was starting to feel really uneasy. We sat by the fireplace, and he started talking about his writing. He wrote horror stories, he said, inspired by the dark history of the area. He told me tales of disappearances, strange rituals, and unexplained deaths. It was all a bit too much, a bit too intense for a first date. As the night went on, things got weirder. He started acting strangely, his eyes darting around the room, his voice dropping to a whisper. He kept talking about the spirits and the old ways and things that just didn't make any sense. I tried to steer the conversation to something lighter, but he just kept going back to the dark stuff. At one point, he got up and went to a bookshelf, pulling out a leather-bound book. It looked ancient, the pages yellowed and brittle. He opened it to a random page and started reading aloud in a language I didn't recognize. It sounded like some kind of incantation, and the air in the cabin seemed to grow colder. I was officially freaking out. I told him I had to leave, that I wasn't feeling well. He didn't try to stop me, just gave me that unsettling smile and said, "Of course, I'll drive you back." The drive back was even more terrifying than the drive there. He drove like a maniac, speeding down the dark, winding roads, the Jeep rattling and shaking. I was gripping the seat, praying we wouldn't crash. He didn't say a word, just kept that creepy smile on his face. When we finally arrived back at my apartment, I practically jumped out of the car. I thanked him quickly and ran inside, locking the door behind me. I didn't breathe easily until I was safely inside my own apartment. I blocked his number, deleted him from social media, and tried to erase the whole night from my memory. But it was hard. I kept having nightmares about the cabin, the dolls, the book, and that creepy smile. A few weeks later, I was talking to a friend about my dating disaster, and she told me something that made my blood run cold. She said that she had heard stories about a guy who lived out in the woods, a writer who was obsessed with the occult. She said that people in the area whispered that he was involved in some kind of dark rituals, that he was dangerous. I don't know if it was the same guy, but the description fit Liam perfectly. And the thought that I had spent an evening alone with someone who might be involved in something truly evil, well, it still gives me the chills. I never went on another date from that app again, and I definitely learned my lesson about trusting a profile picture and a few charming texts. Sometimes, the things that seem too good to be true really are. And sometimes, a dating app can lead you straight into a real-life horror story. So yeah, that was my worst date ever. I don't think anything will top that. And honestly, I hope nothing ever does. I'm sticking to staying at home with my cat from now on. Okay, so picture this. I'm chilling at home, right? Scrolling through this dating app. Bored out of my skull on a Friday night. Pizza crumbs everywhere. Netflix paused mid-binge. Then boom, I see him. Liam. Seriously, the guy looked like he stepped out of a magazine. Dark hair, piercing blue eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers. Swipe right so fast my thumb almost catches fire. We matched instantly. We started texting, and he was even cooler than his pictures. Smart, funny, seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Not just the usual, "Hey, you're hot" nonsense. We talked for hours that night, about everything from our favorite movies to our dreams for the future. It felt different. Like maybe, just maybe, this could be something real. After a week of nonstop texting, he asked me out. He suggested this little Italian place downtown, La Vecchia Osteria. Said it was authentic and romantic. Sounded perfect. I spent like 2 hours trying to figure out what to wear. Ended up going with this cute black dress and my favorite boots. The restaurant was exactly how he described it. Cozy, dimly lit, candles flickering on every table. Liam was already there, waiting for me. He looked even better in person. He stood up when I walked in, pulled out my chair, the whole shebang. I was already feeling butterflies. The dinner was amazing. The food was incredible, and the conversation flowed so easily. We talked about our families, our jobs, our embarrassing childhood stories. He laughed at all my jokes, even the lame ones. I was totally falling for him. Then, he started talking about his family. He said they were different. Wealthy but eccentric. They lived way out in the country, in this huge, old estate. He didn't go into specifics, just said they were private people. I didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, everyone has weird family quirks, right? After dinner, he suggested we go for a walk. It was a beautiful night. The stars were out, and the city was quiet. We strolled along the riverfront, holding hands. It felt like something out of a movie. Then he said, "I want to show you something." He led me away from the main street, down a dark, narrow alley. I hesitated for a second. It felt a little sketchy, but I trusted him. He wouldn't do anything to hurt me, right? We walked for a few blocks, until we reached this old, abandoned building. It looked like it had been empty for years. The windows were boarded up, the walls were covered in graffiti. "What is this place?" I asked, feeling a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "This is where I come to think," he said, his voice low and serious. "I want to show you something special." He pulled out a key and unlocked the heavy metal door. It creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty interior. The air inside was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. I didn't want to go in, but I didn't want to seem like a scaredy cat either. He led me inside, deeper and deeper into the building. The only light came from his phone flashlight, which flickered and danced across the walls. We passed through room after room, each one more dilapidated than the last. Then, he stopped in front of a large, wooden door. It was intricately carved with strange symbols and patterns. "What's behind this door?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He just reached out and slowly, deliberately, opened the door. The room beyond was lit by a single candle, casting eerie shadows on the walls. In the center of the room was a table, covered in a red velvet cloth, and on the table was a human skull. My breath caught in my throat. "What is this?" I stammered, my heart pounding in my chest. He turned to me, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. He wasn't smiling anymore. "This is my sanctuary," he said, his voice cold and distant. "This is where I connect with my ancestors." He started talking about rituals, about sacrifices, about the power of the afterlife. I couldn't understand half of what he was saying. It was like he was speaking a different language, a language of madness. I tried to back away, but he grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "You're special," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You're chosen. You're going to help me." I didn't know what he meant, and I didn't want to find out. I pulled away from him, as hard as I could, and ran. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me, out of the building, down the alley, back to the main street. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and leaned against it, gasping for breath. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his eyes, the skull on the table. I knew I had to get away from him. The next day, I blocked his number, deleted him from all my social media accounts, and told my friends what happened. They were horrified. They told me to go to the police, but I was too scared. I didn't have any proof. It was just my word against his. I moved to a different apartment, changed my phone number, and tried to forget about him. But I couldn't. The memory of that night, the fear, the sheer terror, was burned into my brain. It's been a year since that happened. I'm still scared. I still look over my shoulder every time I go out. I still have nightmares. I don't think I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. Dating apps? Forget about it. I'm done. I'd rather spend the rest of my life alone than risk going through something like that again. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I was too trusting, too eager to find love. But whatever the reason, I learned my lesson. Some people are just not who they seem. And sometimes, the person you think is your dream come true is actually your worst nightmare. It still gives me chills thinking about it. Like, what if I hadn't run? What was he going to do? I try not to think about it, but it's always there, lurking in the back of my mind. I'm just glad I got out. It all started with an app, obviously. I was scrolling through, bored on a Tuesday night, when I saw his profile. Liam, it said. He had this artsy black and white photo of him leaning against a brick wall, looking all moody and mysterious. He listed his interests as old movies, vinyl records, and deep conversations. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, so I swiped right. Match. We started chatting, and he seemed genuinely cool. Not your typical, hey, what's up? kind of guy. He asked about my favorite books, my dreams, stuff that actually made me think. We talked for hours that first night, and I was already getting that fluttery feeling in my stomach. After a week of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed this little antique shop downtown that also had a coffee bar in the back. Seemed like a decent spot, not too loud, not too fancy. I was kind of nervous, I'm not gonna lie. I spent way too long trying to decide what to wear. I settled on a simple black dress and my favorite boots, hoping to strike that balance between casual and cute. When I arrived, Liam was already there, waiting near the entrance. He looked even better in person. He had these intense green eyes and a kind smile. We hugged, and even that felt electric. We grabbed coffee and wandered around the antique shop. He knew so much about everything. He could tell you the history of a random porcelain doll or the year a specific record was pressed. It was actually pretty impressive. As we talked, I noticed something a bit off. It wasn't anything major, just little things. He kept staring at me, like really staring, and it made me a little uncomfortable. And he had this weird habit of repeating things I said, almost like he was trying to memorize them. But I brushed it off. Maybe he was just nervous too, right? We decided to go for dinner after. He suggested this out-of-the-way Italian restaurant he knew. It's a hidden gem, he said. The place was definitely hidden. It was tucked away on a dark, deserted street, and the building itself looked pretty run down. But I was trying to be open-minded. Inside, the restaurant was dimly lit and almost completely empty. There was only one other couple there, sitting in a far corner. The waiter led us to a table by the window, and we ordered. The food was actually really good, surprisingly. But Liam's behavior was starting to get weirder. He kept asking me really personal questions. Like, way too personal for a first date. He wanted to know about my childhood, my family, my deepest fears. I tried to deflect, but he was persistent. And his eyes, they seemed to bore right through me. Then he started talking about how he felt like he knew me already. Like we were destined to meet. He said things like, "I've been waiting for you my whole life, and I feel like we're soulmates." It was all a bit much, and it was definitely starting to freak me out. I tried to steer the conversation back to something lighter, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept pushing, probing, trying to dig deeper into my psyche. I started to feel trapped. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to be rude. As dinner went on, the other couple left, and we were the only ones in the restaurant. The waiter seemed to disappear, and the silence became deafening. Liam reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "I need to show you something," he said, his voice low and intense. "Show me what?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's a surprise," he replied, a strange smile spreading across his face. He stood up and pulled me up with him. "Come on," he said, leading me towards the back of the restaurant. I hesitated. "Where are we going?" "Just trust me," he said, his grip tightening on my hand. I really didn't want to go, but I felt like I couldn't say no. He led me through a dark hallway, past the kitchen, and to a door at the back of the building. He unlocked the door with a key he pulled from his pocket and pushed it open. We stepped into a small, overgrown garden. It was eerily silent, and the only light came from a flickering street lamp nearby. In the center of the garden, There was a stone well. What is this? I asked, my voice trembling. Liam didn't answer. He just stared at the well, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. He started to walk towards it, pulling me along with him. Liam, stop, I said, pulling back. I don't like this. He stopped and turned to face me. His expression was different. It was like a mask had slipped, and I was seeing the real him for the first time. His eyes were cold and empty, and his smile was gone. You don't understand, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I need you. He started to walk towards me, his hands outstretched. I took a step back, my mind racing. I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, back through the garden, through the restaurant, and out into the street. I didn't stop running until I was a block away, gasping for breath. I never looked back. I called a cab and went straight home. I locked all the doors and windows and didn't sleep a wink that night. The next day, I blocked Liam on everything. I deleted his number, unfriended him on social media, erased every trace of him from my life. I never went back to that restaurant, and I never saw Liam again. But I still think about him sometimes. I wonder who he really was, and what he wanted from me. And I'm incredibly grateful that I got out of there when I did. Dating is just a no for me now. It's a scary world out there, and I'm happy being single. Thanks very much. I never thought I'd be that girl. You know, the one with the dating horror story everyone whispers about. I always figured I was too sensible, too grounded to fall for some creep. I guess that's what makes it so messed up. It all started with a stupid app, like most bad decisions do. His profile was normal, maybe a little too normal, looking back. Ryan, late 20s, liked hiking, craft beer, and volunteering at animal shelters. His pictures were decent, not model material, but cute in a rugged, outdoorsy way. We matched, chatted for a few days, and things seemed fine. I wasn't blown away, but I wasn't running for the hills either. He seemed genuinely nice, and that was enough for me at the time. I was tired of the bros and the guys who only wanted one thing. So I agreed to a date. We decided to meet at this new restaurant downtown, a place with supposedly amazing burgers and a chill vibe. I got there a few minutes early and waited, trying to play it cool, scrolling through Instagram like I didn't have a care in the world. He showed up right on time, which I appreciated. He looked pretty much like his pictures, maybe a little more intense in person. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. The date started okay. We talked about our jobs, our families, the usual first date stuff. He was a good listener, asking questions and actually seeming interested in my answers. He laughed at my jokes, even the lame ones, and I started to relax a little. Maybe this wouldn't be a complete waste of an evening. Then, things started to get weird. Subtly weird at first. He kept steering the conversation back to me, not in a flattering way, but in a probing, almost invasive way. He wanted to know everything. My childhood, my dreams, my deepest fears. It felt like an interrogation, not a date. I tried to change the subject, ask him about himself, but he'd brush it off, deflecting with vague answers and then turning the focus back to me. He wanted to know about my past relationships, and when I mentioned an ex, his eyes narrowed. He pressed me for details, wanting to know exactly why we broke up, what he was like, everything. It was making me really uncomfortable. He also started making these comments, little things that made me pause. Like when I mentioned I lived alone, he said, "That must be nice, having all that freedom." But the way he said it, it felt less like a compliment and more like a calculation. As the night went on, his behavior escalated. He started touching me more, a hand on my arm, a lingering touch on my back. Each time, I'd subtly pull away, but he didn't seem to notice, or maybe he just didn't care. Then, he asked if I wanted to go back to his place, just to hang out, he said, with this creepy smile that didn't reach his eyes. My stomach dropped. I made some excuse about having an early morning and needing to get home. He didn't seem happy about it, but he didn't push. He walked me to my car, and as I unlocked the door, he grabbed my hand. "I had a really great time," he said, his voice low and husky. "I can't wait to see you again." I mumbled something noncommittal, got in the car, and practically peeled out of the parking lot. I spent the rest of the night feeling uneasy, like I'd just dodged a bullet. I wrote it off as a bad date, a weird guy, and tried to forget about it. But he didn't let me forget. The next day, I got a text from him. "Hope you made it home okay. Had a great time last night." I ignored it. Then, another text a few hours later. "Thinking about you." I blocked his number. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. He started emailing me. He found my email address through my work website, I guess. The emails were initially harmless, just asking how I was, saying he wanted to see me again. But they quickly became more intense, more frequent. He started saying things like, "We have a connection, and I know we're meant to be together." I blocked his email address too, but he just created new ones. It was like playing whack-a-mole. Each email sent a jolt of fear through me. I started checking my windows and doors every night before bed. I felt like I was being watched. Then, one evening, I came home from work and found a note on my door. It was handwritten on a piece of notebook paper. "I know you're avoiding me," it said, "but you can't hide forever." That was it. I completely freaked out. I called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do since he hadn't actually threatened me. They suggested I file a restraining order, but that seemed like a hassle, and I wasn't even sure it would work. I started staying with friends, hopping from couch to couch, afraid to go back to my apartment. I felt like I was living in a movie, a bad one. One night, I was at my friend Sarah's place, trying to relax, watching some stupid reality show. I got a text message from an unknown number. It was a picture of me, sitting on Sarah's couch, watching TV. The caption read, "I see you." I screamed. Sarah grabbed my phone, looked at the picture, and her face went white. We called the police again, and this time, they took it seriously. They sent a patrol car to Sarah's house and started investigating. They traced the phone number to a burner phone. They checked Ryan's apartment, but he was gone. He'd packed up everything and disappeared. The police are still looking for him, but so far, no luck. I've moved to a new city, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media accounts. I'm trying to start over, but the fear is always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Every time I meet someone new, I can't help but wonder if they're going to turn out to be another Ryan. I still go on dates, but they are more casual now, at least for the time being. I have noticed that I do not stay out late or drink a lot. I will not allow myself to be in a vulnerable position. Also, I make sure to let my family and friends know who I will be with, so they know who to investigate if I was ever to go missing. I will always have this in the back of my mind. It is something I have to carry with me for the rest of my life. I will never understand why he fixated on me, a random person from a dating app. I will never understand why I got this experience. I will never understand what I did to deserve this. I will always be wondering,